the new ending to that speech.
All right. Let's give another round of applause to Dave Sullivan, please. Okay, our next speaker is Dr. Joe Wenke. He is an LGBTQ rights activist, a social critic, and an observational satirist. He is the founder and publisher of Trans Uber, a publishing company which focuses on LGBTQ rights, free thought, and the promotion of equality for all people. He is also the author of You Got to Be Kidding, a radical satirical of the satire. Let me say that again. You Got to Be Kidding, a radical satirical approach satire of the Bible. Thank you. His next book is coming out soon, and it will be called Palpable. The ex-Catholics, an ex-Catholic calls out the Catholic Church. He also has a novel coming out soon called Talk Show. Please welcome Dr. Joe Wenke.
Well, thanks a lot, Stax. That was really cool, and thanks to Hugh and Dave. Great presentations. You know, it's really great to be here because this is my hometown, Philly, and I'm just overjoyed to be participating in this conference, and I'm really proud to count myself as part of the community of free thinkers. So in that spirit, I'd like to begin by sharing a few thoughts on our theme, unity and the community. Now, it's clear to me that we are most united and most authentically a community when we embrace and celebrate diversity. That means that we as a community must be inclusive, not exclusive. So we need to be open, we need to welcome, we need to entertain all points of view. We need to be open to all questions, however intimidating, and open to all answers as well, realizing that there is no final answer, and every provisional answer poses a new question. So we need to respect and embrace everyone who openly and honestly seeks the truth, whether we agree or disagree with them or not. Keeping in mind, and I think this is true for most of us, how we ourselves have evolved over time, taking into account all of those twists and turns of belief and non-belief, of intellectual experimentation and discovery. So as a member of this community, what I would say is our core value is really freedom. Freedom of thought, freedom of speech, which of course includes freedom of religion, so we must respect and embrace those who believe and who reciprocate our respect. So I'm respectfully disagreeing with Dave on the subject of respect. In other words, believers are members of our community too, but as a community that stands for inclusion and diversity, we need to expand and redefine what freedom of religion really means. We need to speak out, we need to educate, we need to raise awareness throughout society that freedom of religion also means freedom from religion. That is the freedom to question and to doubt, to say as positively and as passionately as we can when we're confronted by a belief that is an offense to reason or that is contrary to fact. No, that's nonsense. That is not true. That does not stand the test of reason and science. For freedom of religion also means freedom from religion. But to take that proposition an important step further, to get to really the core of what I want to say, allow me to emphasize that freedom from religion not only means that you and I are free not to believe, it also means that you and I must be free from victimization in the name of religion. Now, unfortunately, people often use religion to justify their own hatred and bigotry against people who are different from them. And in this country, in this culture, the religious justification of bigotry is most often based on the Bible. It's based on the absolutely absurd belief that God, the creator of the universe, is the author of the Bible, and that therefore, whatever the Bible says is true. Now, let's pretend for just a moment that this absurd belief is true. Let's pretend that there is a God, that God is male, and that he is the author of the Bible. Well, what I would say, if that were true, is simply this. Just because God is a bigot doesn't make it right. It just makes God a bad God. So shame on him, and shame on anybody who uses their belief in God and the Bible to justify their own bigotry. Unfortunately, Bible-based bigotry is a very old story. Indeed, it's as old as the Bible. For example, the justification for the denigration of women, the idea that women are inferior to men, goes all the way back to the story of Adam and Eve. According to that story, as we all know, Eve was tempted by a talking snake to eat a piece of fruit that God said she and Adam shouldn't eat. She eats the fruit, Adam eats it too, but it's all Eve's fault. I mean, after all, how could Adam be expected to resist the charms of a naked woman? So Eve's transgression inspires God to do what? He invents suffering and death. And so everything bad that ever happens throughout all of history until the end of time is the fault of the woman. And for all that time, men are the boss of women, or so the story goes. Now similarly, the justification for believing that black people are inferior to white people, indeed the justification for slavery itself, was for hundreds of years, seems foreign today, but hundreds of years, based on the Bible story of the curse of Ham. Anti-Semitism has often been justified by the absurd idea that all Jewish people are responsible for killing Jesus, who was, of course, Jewish. Then there's the belief that your religion is the one true religion, and that other people not only have no right to different religious beliefs, they have no right to live. That incredibly lethal idea comes to fruition in the oxymoronic notion of holy war, which is perpetuated today by radical Islamic interpretation of jihad, but which has a long and bloody history in Christianity as well, as evidenced by the Crusades and the Inquisition. So all of these beliefs are hateful and bigoted, but here's the point that we need to recognize. People who practice bigotry do not think that they are bigots. They think they're right. They think they're right in large part because of their religious beliefs. Their beliefs make them self-righteous in their hatred and bigotry. Amazingly, even when religious beliefs may not be the primary justification for hatred and bigotry, haters seldom see a conflict between their hatred and their religious beliefs. Now, I grew up not far from here in the dark days of the late 50s and 60s in an all-white working-class neighborhood, and I can tell you that almost all of the adults in my neighborhood were racist. Some of them were rabidly racist. They called black people niggers and coons. Others were less obvious, but all of these people had the same view. They all thought that black people were inferior to white people, intrinsically inferior, that is. They thought black people were by nature stupid, immoral, and dangerous. Yes, dangerous. Ironically, the white racists in my neighborhood were all afraid of the people they looked down upon. They also thought that they themselves were good, God-fearing Christians. They didn't think they were racists. They didn't think they were bigots. They thought they were right. People who are bigoted against gay, lesbian, and transgender people don't think they're bigots either. They think they're right, and they believe that their view of lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender people, LGBT people, is actually sanctioned by God. According to these people, being homosexual is unnatural, contrary to nature, perverted, or to use the Catholic Church's term, disordered. It sounds kind of cool and crazy, but that's what they call it. I can't conceive really of a more hateful or disgusting characterization of another human being than to say that the very way they are, their very being, is unnatural or perverted, but that is exactly what LGBT bigots believe. That's why the phrase, love the sinner, hate the sin, is really just a form of hate speech. rather than legitimate Christian compassion. It says, I don't hate you, you're my neighbor. The Bible tells me to love my neighbor, and I do, but you, my neighbor, need to change. Being homosexual is not an essential part of your being. You weren't born that way. Something went wrong somewhere, and you became perverted. You need to acknowledge that and get some therapy. Ex-gay therapy, go straight, become heterosexual, love someone of the opposite gender. If you can't do that, well then you can never marry, and you can never have sex, and by the way, keep away from the Boy Scouts too. So LGBT bigots take their bigotry to a great length. I recently wrote a piece for the Huffington Post on decoding hate speech. Now, in the piece, I made the point that usually hate speech is pretty direct. A good example is the web address for the Westboro Baptist Church. As some of you may know, it's godhatesfags.com. There's no need to decode that message. If you go to the website, you'll find links to godhatesislam.com, godhatesthemedia.com, and godhatestheworld.com. It would actually be a breath of fresh air if I went to the site one day and found a link to the web address godhateshimselfforcreatingtheworld.com. But I'm not expecting that anytime soon. So that's the usual type of direct hate speech, but sometimes hate speech isn't direct at all. It may even be a little bit involved. Consider, for example, how many anti-LGBT organizations use the word family in their name. And there are a lot of these organizations too. They've appropriated the word almost as if they own it. The list includes the American Family Association, Concerned Women for America's Culture and Family Institute, Family Research Council, Family Research Institute, Family Watch International, Focus on the Family, Illinois Family Institute, United Families International, as well as family policy councils, which sounds very totalitarian, in 36 states across the country. These organizations, along with other anti-LGBT groups such as Truth in Action Ministries, Liberty Council, Mass Resistance, the National Organization for Marriage, and the Traditional Values Coalition, define the family as an exclusively heterosexual social unit. Their use of the word family and the phrase traditional family values is itself a form of hate speech, and it includes all of the following false and hateful meanings, all packed into this word family. If you go to their website, you look at their videos, this is what they mean when they say the word family. They mean that gay, lesbian, and transgender people do not have the right to form families, that is, marry or adopt children. Having same-sex parents is harmful to children. Marriage equality will destroy the marriages of heterosexual couples. Marriage equality actually promotes polygamy and bestiality. Gay, lesbian, and transgender people cannot lead or serve children or adolescents in the community. Homosexuals do not procreate, so they recruit children to be homosexual. Homosexuals are much more likely to be pedophiles than heterosexuals. Tell that to all the young women who've been raped by male members of their own family. Parents who have gay, lesbian, or transgender children may have actually helped make their children gay, lesbian, or transgender and have failed as parents. Parents should reject rather than love and support their children if they come out as gay, lesbian, or transgender. Anti-bullying programs promote homosexuality. Adults in the schools and in the community who support LGBT youth and oppose bullying are in fact bullying them into becoming homosexual. It goes on. The high incidence of depression and suicide among LGBT youth is a myth. And finally, LGBT youth who are depressed or suicidal are that way because they are lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, not because they are rejected by their families and bullied at school and in the community. The leaders and followers, there have to be followers or there's no movement, right, of anti-LGBT organizations use the word family to ostracize LGBT people. And in their use of this word, they're actually saying that lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender people have no place in families and no place in society. Indeed, they're distorting and perverting the meaning of the beloved concept of the family to stigmatize LGBT people and to treat them as pariahs. Their use of the word family dehumanizes and objectifies LGBT people as a threat to families and a danger to children. In doing so, they provide, actually, I think, a justification for the criminalization and violent persecution of LGBT people. Now, what I would say is, regardless of our sexual orientation or gender identity, any of us in this room, I think that many of us, as members of the community of free thinkers, atheists, humanists, can empathize with how devastating it is to be ostracized from the family unit. I'm sure some of us had supportive families, but I would venture to say most of us have not. I've experienced that myself in my own family. So most of us know what it feels like when we're rejected by our own families as a result of having rejected their religious beliefs or rejected our upbringing. So we know all about rejection and being ostracized by family and society. So there's no doubt that Bible-based bigotry is lethal. In the case of LGBT bigotry, it literally gives people permission to commit acts of violence. For evidence of this, we don't need to look at Russia and its anti-gay law, or to Muslim countries where homosexuality is actually punishable by death. We only need to look at what seems like almost daily examples of anti-gay and anti-transgender violence on the streets of US towns and cities. I live in Connecticut, New York, and so I care about what happens there. And this past June, Mayor Bloomberg came out and said, you know what, hate crimes are way down, but guess what? They've doubled in the city in the first 6 months of this year when it comes to anti-gay or anti-transgender hate crimes. Just a few weeks ago, a young transgender woman was murdered in Harlem, a couple of blocks away from where Giselle Extravaganza grew up and where her mother still lives. Giselle is the transgender model who appears as the angelic nun on the cover of my book, You Gotta Be Kidding, which is my satirical reading of the Bible. And she also appears as the evil and possessed transgender pope on the cover of my new book, Papal Bull, an ex-Catholic calls out the Catholic Church. So whether Bible-based bigotry is focused on LGBT people, or women, or blacks, Jewish people, or indeed our community, it needs to be called out and exposed. I hate name-calling. In most instances, it's disrespectful, offensive, just plain stupid, though incredibly popular on social media sites like Twitter and YouTube. But actually, it's not always wrong to involve yourself in name-calling. I mean, I think of what Ralph Waldo Emerson once said about a foolish consistency. He said, it's the hobgoblin of little minds. So his wisdom, I think, applies in the case of name-calling. Specifically, if somebody is a bigot, you have a right, in fact, you have a responsibility to call them out and say, hey, you're a bigot. Trust me, bigots need the education, whether they like it or not. We also need to condemn the religious justification for hatred and bigotry, while at the same time acknowledging that the roots of those attitudes go a lot deeper. I mean, it's pretty weird when you think about the fact that bigots hate people they don't know. They hate them because of the group they belong to. If you're a member of the group they hate, then they hate you, even though they know nothing else about you. That's the very definition of bigotry. Bear in mind, most of the attacks on gay or transgender people, in those instances, the attackers are total strangers. They attack their victims without provocation, on sight, simply because they think they, quote, look gay, or because they identify their victim as transgender. But why hate a group of people? Well, you know, in almost every case, people don't hate people from the group they belong to. Isn't that interesting? They hate people from a group they don't belong to. So for example, straight people don't hate other straight people just because they're straight, and white people don't hate other white people just because they're white. Haters, bigots, seem almost invariably to hate people who are different from them. Of course, we do have to consider the possibility that a lot of these haters secretly hate themselves. To me, and to a lot of people, different is great. Different is amazing. But to the haters, different is bad. Are haters afraid of the different people? Do they feel threatened by them? Or are they, on the other hand, secretly attracted to them? Could be. But if haters do feel threatened, what exactly is the threat? Do they think they are going to be hurt by the different people? Do they think the different people are going to take something important away from them, like a job or a girlfriend? Are they going to change the neighborhood? Do they maybe speak a language that the very intelligent hater doesn't speak or understand? Do they dress differently, eat different types of foods, celebrate different holidays? Just what are haters thinking, if anything? It's extremely difficult, if not impossible, to get to the bottom of hatred and bigotry. However hard we try to understand why, the answer always seems beyond our grasp. It's clear, however, that hatred and bigotry are triggered by a perception of the other, of someone who appears to be foreign or different, and it's that insight that actually takes me back to my opening remarks about unity and the community. Perhaps the most powerful way that we as a community can call out hatred and bigotry is by being an authentic community, a community that is open to all points of view and that embraces diversity. That, to me, is in and of itself a repudiation of bigotry. Individually, each of us can stand up for freedom and equality simply by being ourselves, by expressing our own unique identities every single day of our lives. In doing so, I suggest we take our inspiration from the universe. The universe is diverse. We are part of that diversity. Let's celebrate it. Thanks a lot, everybody.